Welcome everybody. We are here in sunny Sarasota, Florida. Woo! Is that just not amazing? How amazing is that? We're here with the most amazing Andrew Ford, beautiful wife Lathrop over there. This is going to be an awesome show. It's going to be an awesome time. So let's get this show on the road.
What's it worth?
I am so excited. Guess who I see here today? Gus Melass. Come on up here, our good buddy. Woo! Brilliant!
How are you?
Oh, I love him.
Smattering of applause.
Andrew, how are you?
Thank you for coming down, guys.
Thank you, Andrew.
What have you brought down for us this morning?
You know, this is just something I picked up in my closet. Actually, it was on my wall. My cats collect Coca-Cola memorabilia, actually. And you sold a piece that I gave you some time ago.
Absolutely. That was a Coca-Cola Scouts car wash sign as well. These are from the mid 20th century.
Sure.
I suspect this is known as the Coca-Cola Button.
Right.
You see this one. I like this one where it says "Drink Coca-Cola in bottles." You're all familiar with the Candler family that began the Coca-Cola brand in Atlanta, Georgia, and after many changes over the years, they were directly responsible for some of the earliest marketing we had here in the States. Of course, the earlier Coca-Cola pieces were more Victorian.
Right.
This is more of the 1940s, 1950s design that you saw outside of country stores. And,
right.
This was to market the drinks.
General stores and all that.
Absolutely.
And what's the shape, you think, on this?
This may have been indoors at one point. I suspect it may have been. It's actually quite good condition.
I got this with another cardboard piece. You know, the ones that had the cardboard,
The cutouts.
cutouts.
Absolutely.
And I have a 1944 sign that I'm going to bring another time.
I look forward to it.
And that is in mint condition. But when do you think that you date this particular button?
You know, these were done with that patenting. I think these were typically done anywhere post World War II, all the way through about the 1960s. And my guess would be this is probably 60 to 70 years old. Condition's quite good. I've been doing shows in the Atlanta area, antique shows, for over 20 years. You see a lot of Coca-Cola memorabilia. I've seen it.
Is that a hotter market up there for that?
It's a particularly strong market, absolutely. In fact, a lot of it goes that way.
So you know where I'm going, Andrew.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
What's it worth?
We'll have to bring it. I've seen these go anywhere from $300 to $800. This one in this condition is probably on the higher end of that market.
Okay.
This is particularly good graphics. There's no rust. There's no apologies to the backside of it.
Yeah.
Wouldn't surprise me at all in today's market. We see this bring several $100s, but it's a good piece of the collectibles market of Coca-Cola, and I think it would sell with alacrity.
Thank you so much for that.
And thanks for coming down this morning.
Good morning.
I'm Andrew Ford.
It's nice to see you. I'm Sally Wood.
Pleasure. What have you brought us this morning?
A purse.
Here we have a beautifully engraved sterling silver purse. You're absolutely correct. And this is jeweler engraved. This is all freehand engraving from the turn of the century, again,
Yeah.
late Victorian period, up into the early Art Deco period. This is a particularly fine piece. It has a cabochon catch on this one that appears to be a cabochon amethyst. And if you'll notice here very closely, this particular purse was retailed through Tiffany and Company.
Yes.
Okay, and this is during a time when Tiffany, this is probably one of their Union Square marks. You know, they were on Broadway and Union Square. And this object to be purchased at Tiffany's around the turn of the century would have been a splurge, to say the least. These were made by many silversmiths at the time. You see the quality of this one. This one's identified. And this type of monogram here, this might have been monogrammed after it was made. I suspect it was. These were often made blank, and then they were engraved for the particular owner of this piece.
Mm-hmm.
You can see it's slightly different from the engraving here that's been done. These purses, of course, it's a sterling silver chain as well, and this was made for Tiffany. You also may see signatures for Tiffany that say Tiffany makers over the period. Those were done by the Tiffany makers. This particular piece was made by another maker and then retailed through Tiffany's. Tiffany and Company at the time in New York. With the freehand jeweler's work, you would typically think this is a $200 to $300 purse, except in this case, it's been retailed through Tiffany and Company, and you can add 2 or 3 times the value to that, as it's every 2,000 or 3,000 of these purses might have come from Tiffany's. So it's a much more rare object, and you should be very proud to have this.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing this in today.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. That's nice.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming down this morning for
Thank you.
What's at Work. What have you brought us today?
Well, I'm hoping you can tell me, actually. I don't really have a whole lot of context for these items. I recently had the opportunity to sort of scratch the surface on a family heirloom chest. And so these are a few items that really have no information about. There's not a lot of records, you know, so.
So she's brought us these today. They came out of a hope chest from her family's collection. I'm quite familiar with these battleships. These were created for American military to do to show the plans for different battles and things. They would have had a map on a table, and these would have been placed on the table, and they would have shown the direction that these different battleships would have been coordinated. Here you have the different pieces, and these would have been laid out for the different military officials to plan battles where they were going in and out of harbors and things like that. So these are scale models of the ships that would have been in action at the time. These are typically World War II, anywhere between World War I and World War II. A few of these are stamped out of Chicago. I've seen a few of these marks before on these pieces. These are quite collectible today in the sort of militaria, as well as the marine collectors today. They're made of white metal, and they're quite heavy gauge. If you'll notice,
very heavy.
They're awfully well made over time, and and they have other pieces of scale. You'll find a lot of these. I see these typically from the pieces from the 1930s to the 1950s. I sold a set of these recently at our auction here. We have an auction, Sarasota State Auction here in town, and a group of these. It was really an assembled set. They brought 400 to 600, as I think I remember. I think one group brought around 410. The other group brought about 550. They're still widely collected today, and they're great quality. They appear as though they're toy ships, but they're nothing toys about.
I thought they were toys.
No, these were actually done, cool. Used by the military at the time, and they're really an interesting piece of historical history. So they're quite an interesting collection. I suspect they're an assembled group.
Right, and my that side of my family is from the Chicago area too.
Makes good sense.
Have some connection
Absolutely.
there. That's cool. That's neat. Thank you.
Hi there.
Hello.
Thanks for coming down this morning.
Thank you so much.
Tell us a little about what you brought.
Well, I got these from a friend that I used to work for, and she loved culture.
Yeah.
So she collected all kinds of things from different cultures, and this was something that she gifted me, and I honestly don't know much about them.
These are very likely Chinese bronze vases with the dragon motif here, beautifully engraved. They are signed. I suspect these are Chinese, probably from the turn of the century.
Okay.
So that makes these late Qing dynasty. And if are familiar with the Qing dynasty, it was the last dynasty in China, ended in 1911 before the revolution. And these have the original patina. They're a great size, roughly about 8 inches in height, but heavy, very heavy gauge. I suspect these were made for the domestic use in China. These were not meant for export. Otherwise, they would be identified as either made in China or it's stamped China. These were never stamped that way, so it wouldn't surprise me at all if they made their way to Europe through the Silk Road trade, essentially, and that's maybe where she acquired these pieces. So these were a gift given to you?
Yes.
Wow. Well, I would say for either insurance purposes or fair market value, the Chinese market is quite hot today. Art from China is very much revered and widely collected. Wouldn't surprise me at all if this pair of vases, either through our auction or a good retail shop, you might find these at sort of $800 to $1,200 range as a retail price on these objects.
Okay.
A beautiful gift. You should be very pleased. They're great quality.
I had no idea.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Wow.
Thank you for coming down.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having me.
Hey folks, thanks for coming down today.
Drew,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you.
How are you? Tell us a little bit about what you brought us today.
This, I was told, is a skull, a human skull from Tibet. And I was told, I really don't know very much about it.
Sure.
I found it about 15 years ago in a little dusty shop in Seattle.
Yeah.
And I'd seen pictures of such, but never came upon a real one.
Sure.
This, I was told, was from the Philippines.
Yeah.
Probably 100+ years ago, and the gentleman that sold it to me was at a show, and I forget just where, said this when they would, when the tribes were warring,
Sure.
it was a trophy, and then they would take the enemy's skull and they would make this.
Sure.
I think this is made out of palm
Yeah.
fiber, and I don't know the paint.
I would agree with you. These are typically trophies from battle, essentially. The different tribes that would have acquired these. I've seen these out of the Philippines. I've seen them out of Indonesia. I've seen them with some of the islands as well. This is typically what you would find here, palm ferns and things, and then they would polychrome these pieces, and they would put these out to remind you of sort of their prowess on these things. And this is probably...
Beware.
Yeah, very much beware. I've seen a few of these in early catalogs. They're identified as late 19th century. You'll notice here, folks, a beautiful profile on this one. And these did come out of the islands over the years. And they were quite prized and collected in the early 20th century. Today, there is a ban on human parts being sold today. So these are typically traded and not sold. Of course, they also can't be brought state to state. Otherwise, it's considered some form of trafficking, and I don't know exactly the codes on this one. But this is a very ominous, typical piece that you would see from that period, and actually great condition. You'll notice the underside of this one, if you'll see here, folks, really hasn't been handled much over the years. Very similar to the way it would have been done. The paint is that cornflower blue color. The pigments are really fantastic. These are handmade pigments. These were not paints that were acquired at the store. So they're really a testament of how they've held up over time. They're beautifully made.
And Andrew, let me... And on the back, in the occipital area, I suspect that this might have been trephined at one time and healed.
Sure.
If you look at that defect.
He's got a dental and a medical history, so he's right. He's looking at the skull itself, and I would agree. And again, life in the 19th century was a little more difficult, and if something happened like that, there wasn't a hospital that you could go to, but somebody may have nursed them back, and this gives you an idea that I don't know a lot about the makeup of the skulls, but judging by the line on this one, this is probably a middle-aged male.
I would think.
That's my guess. It doesn't appear to be an elderly figure on this one. Changing gears here slightly.
And that does.
Sure.
That's what.
I've had many of these over time offered to us. You see the beautiful carving on this one, all the different insignias, the metal mounts on this. These are often low-grade metal. Beautiful dragon on the side of this one. You'll notice if you lift the cranial cap on this one, it's got a beautiful interior to this one. Your understanding was this is Nepalese?
Or Tibet.
Tibetan, Nepal, even Bhutan. You'll see all these pieces here. That's right on the border between India and China, and you'll be familiar with these pieces. 3 of these were offered to me about 3 years ago, and they were to be shipped to me from New York City. And I spoke to a lawyer friend of mine who said you might not want to ship them for that very reason. But the quality of this is a little bit better. Usually they're a little more naively done. This is particularly well done. Of course, all the little skulls adorned throughout here. You see the underside of this one. I've seen these online anywhere in the $5,000 to $10,000 range. What did you pay for this, if I may ask?
That was about $900.
900. How long ago did you acquire this?
15, 20 years.
15, 20 years ago?
I'm not dusting it anymore.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all. Again, for insurance purposes, probably a $4,000 or $5,000, even $6,000 appraisal on this one. It's really fantastic quality. It's not
I had no idea.
for everyday decoration for some, but of course, it's a pretty scarce object. No, it's better than Halloween for sure. This is really a fantastic piece, and it's typical of things you would see brought over from that country over the years. These made their way over to the States. These were popular in Europe. They still are, actually. In fact, I know one of the Rockefellers who bought one of these from me in the Hamptons about 10 years ago, and he told me he had quite a serious collection of these that were handed down to him through his family. So there is a collecting base for these pieces. Again, I suspect it's a 19th century one, and really beautifully made with the little semi-precious cabochons here. Really a fantastic piece. If I could show this to the cameras here, and the quality of the carving is superb. You know, they were working with primitive tools, and the tattooing, which is typically what I call this, is extremely detailed, precise. So this was done by a master carver, and this is a trade in the 19th century. Certainly, you see them coming out of Bhutan, Nepal, Tibet. Really an amazing piece, and the beautiful eyes, glass eyes, to give it a very realistic nature on this one. Thank you very much for bringing these down today. Really interesting. Thank you.
Have you an estimate on this guy?
I've seen these, again, they're all over the board. I've seen these from several hundred on to a couple, 3,000 on this one. Might even want to do a little carbon dating to get an idea of exactly how early the polychroming on this was done. Haven't seen one of these in quite some time. It's not something you run into very often.
No. That's,
really
nor have I
fantastic
seen them in
quality.
any catalogs or anything.
You really don't. They're pretty scarce objects. Thank you both for bringing them down today.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Pleasure.
Thanks for coming down this morning.
Thank you.
What have you brought us?
Well, these are by, I believe, a famous artist, Jungwirth,
Yeah.
and I'm pretty sure his daughter drew these.
Okay.
So I'm just here to figure out some more stuff about them.
Well, these are typical. You see these are sort of fashion drawings and things like that, I suspect. This one's dated, identified as Lady Elsie and Eva. So these are less about fashion, maybe about family members and friends that she was drawing at the time. They appear to be late 19th century drawings. The quality is quite nice. This one's identified as Leonard. So I suspect these are probably family members, watercolors and pencil drawings from that period. Here's Frank, and so this may have been her family lineage, essentially, that she was doing on paper at the time. There is a little note that's identified here as Father Joseph Jungwirth, born 1869. So that makes good sense. These are probably right around turn of the century. I can tell by the paper, right from around 1890 to around 1910. Conditions quite good. They're very interesting. They also almost fall into that folk art category that you have here. Appears to have, we have roughly around 15 of these drawings. You know, without having a whole background on the artists themselves, maybe one can imagine somewhere in the $50 to $100 range per painting, and some of the better quality ones might bring a bit more. But this is typical from artwork from the turn of the century. They're just beautiful images of genre scenes from that late 19th century period. As a group, maybe $300 to $500, $400 to $600.
Okay.
Thank you very much for bringing these down this
Thank
morning.
you, of course.
Pleasure. Thank
Yeah.
you. The folk art paintings from the 19th century.
Hi, how are you?
How are you? Thanks
I'm
for coming down this
fantastic.
morning. Tell me a little bit about what you brought this morning.
These are just 2 finds of mine. This was at a garage sale.
Okay.
And this a friend of mine left at my house, honestly. Okay. And they're just sitting outside, sitting in my house. So I thought I'd bring them down and let you take a peek at them. And
well, here we have an early oil lamp, clear glass. I suspect the chimney may be a replacement at one point. Probably from the late 1800s all the way through the 1920s and 30s on this one. I suspect this one would bring somewhere in the $95 to $150 range. They're all over the board.
The reason that I brought it was because of the handle. That was just kind of unique.
Sure. This was meant, of course, for you to walk around the house with. These, of course, were on ships as well, but I suspect this one was almost what you've heard of the word chamber sticks before.
Yes.
This is an oil lamp. Before electricity, you might have brought this from the downstairs up. It would have illuminated your room upstairs. They are still quite collectible, and the condition of that's quite good.
Okay, thank you very much.
Absolutely. This is a crock. Obviously, it's a glazed crock. This one, I believe it had is it a signature in the front?
Yes, sir. Well, actually, it has a number 6 on the front.
That's the size. That's a 6-gallon crock. It gives you an idea of the different sizes and scales on these. These were typically made, this is probably from about the 1920s, 1930s with this glaze on this one. Again, the 6-gallon, it probably had a cover at one point. The covers get lost. They slip off over time and get damaged.
A crock, like what would you use that for?
Oh, this would have been used for grains, all sorts of different things. So this would have been, a container that would have been used either in the kitchen or in a general store, something like that. And they range in price. Some of these you've heard of Red Wing and the different companies that made these. Some would have been made if they're signed with particular towns.
And is there a sign on the bottom? Do they usually sign them on the bottom?
Usually they're in the glaze on the front.
Okay.
Sometimes they can be embossed on the bottom. I don't believe this one is. I saw it coming up. No signature on the bottom of this one.
Okay.
I think somewhere in the $150 range on this crock. And they can go all the way up to several $100 depending on the size and the rarity.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you very much.
Here we are. You've come down this morning. You brought us a few photographs. Tell me a little bit about what you know about the photograph here.
Well, a friend of mine has the original glass plate out that was used in the camera to make this.
Sure.
To take this photo. This is a hanging in a barn. May have been a lynching.
Yep.
There's 4 people hanging here. So who they are, Miller, Allen, Burnwell, West, who they are, no clue. But you can see the age of the barn. And
you'll notice the image here, folks. He's right. These are 4 gentlemen hanging in a barn here from Indiana. And again, don't have much history on these things, but they identified in the photo who these gentlemen were. I suspect if it were a lynching, they probably wouldn't have identified the gentleman. So this was probably some sanctioned event here for some reason before there were any precincts or anything, but they had probably done something they weren't supposed to, is my guess.
That's true.
And this photograph was made from the plate probably in the mid-20th century. We think this photograph was made.
I would guess.
This kind of ephemera is very collectible as a pieces of Americana, and it's not for everyday decoration in your living room. But this tells this is a real piece of history from our past, and wouldn't surprise me at all if a photo like this would change hands at the $200-300 range.
That'd very be true. So this came with it. And no history on that. They said it came from the same family. Who knows? I don't.
This is also from the 19th century. It's not quite an ambertype, but it's really more of a daguerreotype, a large daguerreotype.
Yes.
This is a really quite a size photo from this time. Typically, you find them in the 2 to 3 inch size. This is about as large an image as you would find in this tin type. This is on tin, 1860 to 1880s, and you see the photography process of her face. Typically children, military with guns, typically can bring a lot of money. This is someone's grandmother at the time, but it's a great piece of photo ephemera from the 19th century. Ought to be worth $150 to $200.
Yeah. And here we have a lot of coin silver.
We had a few pieces of coin come through today. This is typically the fiddlehead pattern, 19th century coin silver. These are tablespoons. These have 18th and 19th century engraved names on these, often stamped. Sometimes you'll see them stamped pure coin, but nice quality. Again, these are low-grade silver tableware pieces, and they're typically from that 1830, 1840, 1850 period. These are small manufacturers. Were these also collected in the Indiana, Ohio area? Where did you acquire these?
All over Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania. I got a lot more of it. I'm going through boxes in my garage. I just find this stuff, you know.
They're actually in particularly good condition. The tips of these spoons typically are worn down from use, and these have a pointed bowl on these, which means these are well cared for and well looked after. Typically these tablespoons bring in the 125 to 150 range. As a group here, we probably have close to $1,000 bill worth of early coin spoons, and very nice quality. You see the early patina on these. These are great tablespoons from the 19th century. Really appreciate you bringing these down today.
Yeah, there's a lot more of them, so.
Well, thank you very much.
I just need to dig them out.
Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you for coming down this morning.
Welcome.
Tell us a little about what you brought with us.
This is from Governor McCorkle's estate sale in West Virginia. So he was governor in the early 1900s.
Yeah. Teens
Yes.
to the 20s or so. Appears to be a piece of Weller. I suspect it is. It's a rather large-scale piece of Weller. Beautiful decoration here. You'll notice the crazing in the glaze, which is pretty typical from this period. If you don't see the crazing, be dubious that it's probably not from the period it's expected to be. You see that beautiful color going from dark to light, and a very free hand on this one. Sometimes pottery is more stiffly painted. This is a pretty serious porcelain painter that did this one. It's got great quality. It's what we call a full body size on this one. It's the entire length and width of the body, and it even has undulation. You can feel in the palms. It's not just painting here, but it's actually raised in the piece itself. A pretty sophisticated piece of Weller. Weller's been around for about 120 years, and I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, this is probably a 9.5 when it comes to pieces by Weller. They're typically much smaller, and with the provenance coming from the governor's collection, that's the kind of information that leads to a piece bringing a premium. Wouldn't surprise me at all. Typical pieces of Weller are in the couple $100 range. A piece of Weller like this, I think I did see a hairline. Am I correct in saying right here there's a hairline? Do you feel that with your finger? An old collector once told me a blind man can tell you more than someone who can see. You feel your way through the pieces, and you can feel the seams. It does come through. So with that hairline, it probably limits this to a several $100 piece, probably up to about $1,000. Without that hairline, wouldn't surprise me at all. This was a $200 to $2,500 piece of Weller. It's in the form of an umbrella stand. And so this was a utilitarian piece as well as decorated. This would have been used for umbrellas, canes, things like that at the front door of someone's home. But today, these are really cabinet pieces. And I think you told me you kept this up high to keep away from all the children and
From the grandchildren.
Absolutely.
I didn't want them throwing balls in it.
Well, I really appreciate you bringing this down today. It's a beautiful decorated piece here. And it's great subject matter for here in the South.
Did they typically do palm? That's why I bought it. I love the palm and the egret.
I would say there's nothing typical about this piece. It's a very atypical piece, and that's really the interesting part about it. Typically, these colors, you'd see them in very flat finishes and things, but this is almost an exhibition size. And he would have paid a pretty penny for this at the time.
Yeah.
This was very likely a bespoke piece. This may have been custom made, custom ordered piece that was done, and. Beautiful decoration, great lines to the piece, and a very good piece of American pottery. Exceptional piece.
Good.